But we were having that discussion, Dave, in the context of all the links of Joey Carberry and Ross Byrne particularly to Ulster over the last while, and we were just discussing the likelihood of getting behind your province when there's a whole bunch of players who are native to another province playing for them.
Yeah, well, there's the debates around the fabric and tradition of your province versus the inescapable fact that we are now in the midst of a professional era. It's a business. We're winning games and lifting trophies, and generating commercial revenue is probably the most important thing for the provinces to continue to progress, and then that feeds into the national team. But there is a balance to be struck. Like, we're nowhere near the situation that we are in England or in France, where it is just so professional and business orientated that, you know, you wonder, would wrestling fans really bother them if there are 15 guys that they have no connection to, but they're good enough to win a top 14 championship and a European Cup, where there's no one who's come through the academy. Maybe there's some ex-Toulouse, ex-Toulon, ex-Clermont guys in their team, and a few Kiwis and a few South Africans, etc., etc. It wouldn't bother them at all, I would say.
Well, ultimately it might be outside influences. If ever Irish Rugby, the provinces ever go that way in terms of the movement of players, either within provinces or externally, it might be the external provinces. Like, it strikes me that if Ireland always remains in full control, as it is kind of at the minute, of its contracts and of its players, there's never any reason to overly, outside of the few examples that we've had over the years, to overly necessarily mingle the provinces.
No, well, there never was until this point. Like, we weren't, it's 10 years ago we weren't having this debate. There was the odd guy that moved, but there was no high profile moves there were between the provinces. Like, we nearly had a couple. Luke Fitzgerald supposedly had a potential move to Munster lined up at one stage, but that didn't come through. There are very few. Robbie Henshaw's the most controversial one over the last 10 years.
Yeah,
and
but again,
it even was that controversial.
Well,
he was moving to a better team,
Connacht
a
fans
team
don't
with
like
more
it,
prospects of
that's
playing the Champions Cup, winning European Cup. So, but I mean, it was high profile at the time, 2 years ago. But all of this is on the back of, you say, of the piece by Peter O'Reilly in last week's Sunday Times, where supposedly David Nizifor and Joe Schmidt rocked up to the Leinster training ground in the week of a European semi-final and issued an ultimatum, telling Leo Cullen that he had to choose between Ross Byrne and Joey Carberry. Whoever he chose would stay at the RDS and the other would head to Belfast. Now, we have since been told that, you know, these times of conversations go on all the time, that no player would ever be told to move against his will, and that it was far from an ultimatum that was issued. But at the same time, you have to wonder how far a province can push it before their own supporters decide they no longer want to go and watch them. Now, our listeners will know I only have to open my mouth and you can identify me as being from Leinster, and I'm a Leinster rugby fan.
Strong D4 accent.
Exactly, yeah. But if 7 or 8 of the Leinster regular...
Tommy does point out that you really are a Cavan native, so, you know.
Yeah, so I'm an Ulster rugby fan as well, is what you're saying. If 7 or 8 of the Leinster regular starting 15 were from Munster, it would get to the point where I would not be as pushed going to watch them. Now, I put that out on Twitter, speaking to try and get the thoughts of some Ulster fans during the week, and a couple did come back to me and say, we don't want Joey Carberry, for a number of reasons.
I think that's bullshit, I have to say. I think Joey Carberry rocks up. And by the way, if you're a neutral Irish rugby fan, like, the opportunity to see somebody like Joey Carberry, who we believe is an absolute star on the rise, playing some sort of regular rugby is... pretty enticing.
We're not
prospect.
talking about neutral rugby fans, we're talking about Ulster fans.
I know, yeah, okay, fair enough. But I also think it's bullshit, because, like, what are the options? IRFU are going to provide them with what we believe is going to become a world-class 10, and not maybe that far off it. And they're going to say, no thanks, he's from Leinster, but we take somebody from Gloucester, or we take somebody from Saracens, or we take somebody from Paris. That's bullshit.
I'm talking about Ulster supporters. I'm not talking about the Ulster hierarchy or those who have to come up with the budgets and have to look after the financial side of things on a year-to-year basis.
Like, why? So they can get behind somebody like Ruan Pienaar, but they can't get somebody behind somebody from Dublin.
Because they have no preconceived notions about Ruan Pienaar. He's just a South African, whereas they would have a preconceived notion when it comes to Joey Carberry, because I know he's born in Auckland, but he's essentially a dub. I think he's playing for Leinster, and it's already, or from a Thai, sorry, our Kildare listeners and viewers will be up in arms.
All 4 of them, yeah.
You're adding another Leinster man into the mix. You could have double digits in terms of the numbers of Leinster players that would be. Yeah. What about him?
He's on his way to Ulster.
He is, yeah.
What's going to happen? I haven't heard a word of discontent about it, and B, if there is, and I don't believe there's a huge amount of it, after a couple of weeks, he'll start to put in the performances that he's put in for Leinster over the last even weeks.
Yeah, performances.
That's all forgotten.
As Tiger Woods said, winning takes care of everything. And if Jordy Murphy does perform as he has been, to the point where I wonder if he's thinking, what have I done here?
That's exactly what he's thinking, I'm sure. Yeah.
Because his level of performance has been so good of late, and he's won a Grand Slam and he could win a Champions Cup medal. What a way to leave Leinster, but at the same time, the world has turned significantly for Jordy Murphy since he signed that contract with Ulster. But anyway, look, that's just the way things work sometimes. But I'm not talking about specific individuals. It's nothing against Murphy or Marty Moore or Joey Carberry or Johnny Cooney. It's the number of them. Eventually, you will get to a tipping point where the sheer number of Leinster men in your team makes it less of an appeal for you to actually renew your season ticket, go and watch them on a weekly basis, because you're not watching Ulster. You're watching Leinster Light is eventually the point you're going to get to.
Do you think that Munster fans are slightly less enthusiastic towards previously the likes of Felix Jones, or currently an Andrew Conway or an Ian Keatley, because they're not from Munster?
Not at all, because these guys are outliers. You and I, before we went on air, sat down and tried to make a list of the Leinster men that have played for Munster in the last 15 years. We got stuck on 5 in a 15-year period.
Not many.
There aren't many.
And none of them at the time of transfer. Maybe Felix Jones aside, because I remember there was a big fuss about him, and I remember Michael Cheika particularly being very peeved about the investment that Leinster had made in him, and the fact that he was, again, a real star in their eyes, and at that point had said, listen, I'm not getting enough game time, I'm off to Munster. So maybe him slightly aside, none of the rest of them really.
No, there weren't huge eyebrows raised. No. We came up with Niall Rowan and Ian Keatley, Andrew Conway, Felix Jones. There was a fifth, I can't even remember who it was. And we look going the other way. Now, these aren't direct transfers, but you're looking at Sean Cronin, Owen Redden, Liam Toland, Trevor Hogan,
Stephen Keogh.
But over a 15, 20-year period. The game is 22 years old in professional terms. So there's never been enough Leinster guys performing in a red shirt on a weekly or semi-weekly basis for Munster fans to feel that way. But I would love to get the thoughts of Munster fans if you were looking at 6 or 7 of them in your current best 15. At what stage, I'm not saying 6 or 7's the number, I'm just asking, what is the tipping point? From an Ulster point of view, from a Munster point of view, at what stage do you begin to see the fabric of your team diluted to the point where you are less likely to want to see them? And
obviously also in that mix is, if you've got 7 or 8 Leinster players in it, at that point it's pretty obvious that the province is not doing their job in terms of bringing players in, and it raises a whole other part of that conversation. Definitely interested to get your thoughts. What are you thinking this morning? If there was that number of players in your team, are you less likely to get behind them? We've had Paddy Logan onto us on Twitter, Dave. He says it's not that we don't want Carberry, it's that we know he'd only be temporary until Sexton retires. Better to get a mentor for McPhillips, Lowry and Curtis. That mentor thing does sort of crop up every now and then. It was certainly one that was used in relation to Ruan Pienaar before he left, that, you know, keep him there for another season, let him mentor some of the younger players coming through, and so he goes after that.
But yeah, like there's 18 months between Johnny McPhillips and Joey Carberry. So they're essentially the same age. Now, vastly different in terms of their experience already in their careers. And the trajectory. But Johnny McPhillips, his career is going to be stunted if Joey Carberry is the starting 10, because if Carberry settles in Belfast, for example, and gets this run of games outside of international windows, he is going to dominate that 10 shirt because he has the talent to do so. Where does that leave Johnny McPhillips? They do need somebody. And that's what a lot of the Ulster fans would have been saying to me, well, look, why don't we get an experienced foreign 10 to come in for 2 years and bring McPhillips on?
So why couldn't that be Joey Carberry?
Because Joey Carberry...
He doesn't have the experience, but he will play the 10 for 2 years in the exact same way.
He's 22 years old. Like, he can't act as a mentor. He's not going to be bringing another guy through. Look, he can't bestow the experience that he has on another young guy, 18 months his junior.
He is only 22, but he does have 10, 15 Ireland caps already. Like, he's played a whole bunch of games.
I'm talking about a guy who's got 60, 70 international caps. Now, the problem is the Irish provinces are no longer fishing in that pond.
There's not many of those that are available.
You can't... The days of a Dougie Howlett arriving with, 60-odd All Black caps.
Lael Afan obviously was one, if they'd have managed to sort of... Perfect example of that player you're
hold on
talking
to.
Yeah.
But, I mean, we will see the Howletts and the Ruan Pienaars, the Rocky Elsoms, the Brad Thorns far less often over the next 10 or 15 years, because unfortunately 4 Irish provinces, they can't shop in their market anymore.
I'm just happy that it's another week down, Dave, and we've managed to mention Brad Thorn again, so
there you go.
This is good time.